Hey guys, this is Eckhart Hello and welcome to another video. We're continuing today the hashtag AskEck series. You guys right now are driving what videos are getting made, so if you've got any topics or questions you'd like to see addressed, leave it down in the comments with the hashtag AskEck included. And if you see any ideas you like, obviously give them a thumbs up as well. Today's question comes from Admiral Miller, who says, if you were to design your own Imperial task force, what ships, fighters, etc. would you command? However, you can't have any SSDs. Your biggest ship is from ISD classes. Other than that, go ham. Thank you very much for the question, Admiral Miller. This is definitely one of my favorite things to do on the channel. So when designing an Imperial fleet, I want to keep within general Imperial Navy doctrine while maybe altering their ships somewhat. As such, the center of my fleet is going to be the Imperial Star Destroyer. Probably the Imperial 2, but honestly, whichever model is available. And this is not only because it has to be, basically, if you're the Empire, but because the ISD was really a great vessel with some weaknesses. The Imperial Star Destroyer could basically outgun any other ship of its era in a straight up fight. Obviously, there are some exceptions. Larger ships, dreadnoughts, battle cruisers were rare, but could destroy an ISD. However, when it came to pure firepower, just ship against ship, an ISD was probably going to take a Mon Calamari cruiser, would at least have a good shot. Most of the time, the rebels were using smaller frigates, so yeah, I think it's a good choice to build your fleet around. The Star Destroyer serves as the center of your fleet, whether you've got one ship, whether you've got two, three more, it really doesn't matter. The thing can dish out damage, it can take it. If properly supported by other vessels, a Star Destroyer is one of the most deadly sights in the entire galaxy. But it's this properly supported by other vessels issue which we need to talk about. The Imperial Sourcebook actually covers this quite well. Generally, Imperial task forces were broken into different lines which had different composition depending on their purpose. However, the Empire had a somewhat bad tendency to use the Star Destroyer as a one-size-fits-all solution, especially given that it carried starfighters. We know that the Empire often believed that with its onboard TIE squadrons, sometimes up to 72 fighters or more, that an ISD could face off against whatever the rebels threw at it. Thus, escort ships, corvettes, they'd sometimes be forgotten about. That was obviously a mistake and one that I am not going to make. When talking about the smallest ships in my fleet, these corvettes, we really have one purpose here. Let's protect our big boy Star Destroyers from enemy fighters. The TIEs will help, but we can't rely on them. There are two vessels that I quite like in this role and which operate quite differently. The first is the Raider class corvette, and this is a ship the Empire has been seen using throughout new Star Wars canon. Games like Star Wars Squadrons show the Raider frequently in formation with Imperial Star Destroyers, and I think that's great. The Raider is almost like the Empire's version of the CR-90. It's 150 meters long. It would ordinarily be bristling with laser cannons, but possessed some minor anti-capital ship weapons. What I like about the Raider is that it's a fast, flexible solution to engage enemy starfighters. Ideally, I think you have at least two of these for every one ISD. These would have a pretty broad engagement area. They can work well with the existing defenses of the Imperial Star Destroyer, and they can't fully be bullied by any enemy frigates or other ships which try to push into the Star Destroyer's space if the ship is busy with other threats. In a perfect world, the Star Destroyers also carry one or two gunships which can help achieve starfighter superiority. Something like the Skip Ray Blast Boat, for example, was commonly found in Imperial skirmish lines. I think it fits pretty well. I talked in my other video about how the Braha Talk was just an excellent little ship the Empire could have benefited from, but we have also very advanced starfighters which can fit the role, including the TIE Defender or even something like the Assault Gunboat. Moving up though in size though, the other ship that I would want dedicated to anti-starfighter duties will not be a surprise to anyone, the Lancer class frigate. I love the Lancer class. Wedge talks it up in the X-Wing series as basically being a nightmare for pilots to face off against. This thing was a dedicated anti-starfighter platform almost like no other. At 250 meters long, it was armed with 25 point defense quad laser cannons. Basically imagine probably even more effective versions of the guns on the Millennium Falcon. So this thing is ideal for protecting your larger ships. Pop a Lancer next to it, put it between your ship and any enemy starfighters, and you've got a good start at least. One of the main issues with the Lancer was that it was fairly slow, which is why I chose the Raider as a companion. You may notice that I'm not giving explicit numbers when it comes to how many of each ship I'd want. That obviously depends on the size of my task force, but I said before, the Lancer was one of the better Imperial ships, which honestly wasn't used because of a lack of foresight. It did its job job perfectly, protecting against the main vulnerability of the ISD, the trench run disease, which saw X-Wings able to get close, cause massive damage, and I think so long as you protect the ship from other enemy vessels with an ISD, you're in good standing. Moving up in this task force, we'd probably have room for a frigate and cruiser ship type. These essentially continue to serve as escorts, but should probably be a bit more capable of fighting on their own. The Lancer class, you could say, is sometimes classified as a frigate. I think it's a bit small. One ship that I really like for the Empire, though, is the Nebulon B, and I mean, this thing is battle tested. There's a reason why the New Republic and the Rebel Alliance relied on it so heavily. It's a great combination of starfighter carrying, anti-starfighter weapons, and even capital ship grade turbo lasers. I also quite like the Architans. Maybe you mix and match the two. I'd be happy, honestly, with either or, but the frigate is sort of in a weird position within this fleet between the cruiser and heavy cruiser and the smaller vessels. So let's talk about the next size ship, probably the largest ones in our fleet aside from the ISDs. It's kind of interesting because the Empire actually has a lot of good options here, but most weren't actually typically used very frequently with ISDs. The Vindicator, for example, or even the Gladiator usually served as the centerpieces for their own fleet. A smaller ship that I really like, and one that Thrawn liked as well, was the Strike Cruiser. At 450 meters long, the Strike Cruiser was quite powerful for its size and was also configurable for different mission profiles, something that I personally would like as a commander, having to adapt to different situations. The thing is, it's not quite as outright powerful as something like a Dreadnought class heavy cruiser, especially in terms of hull strength, but I think as a complement to a Star Destroyer, that's okay. Like, larger Imperial cruisers were usually operating as stand-ins for Star Destroyers, not as escort ships. That's really even the same case with frigates. So the traditional concerns of having to have a ship that's all around competent and dangerous isn't necessarily the same as when I'm trying to design a vessel or choose a vessel which complements the ISD nicely. And again, this is trying to imagine a situation where there's reasonable scarcity. Obviously, if I can choose any ship to add to the fleet, hey, I'm going to have a Venator operating as a carrier and a secondary cruiser as well. The Gladiator with its point defense, turbo lasers, and most importantly, starfighter carrying, hey, that's also great. But I'm imagining I probably won't get access to every ship I want. I think those are really the vessels that would make up the majority of the fleet. I would also want a few one-offs. If possible, I'd want a small interdictor. Probably not going to get that. I'd also like a dedicated starfighter carrier. One of the weaknesses in my fleet is a lack of starfighters. We'll get some from the ISD, we'll get some from some of the escort ships, but if possible, I want another source. If I've got multiple Star Destroyers, maybe I can replace one with a Secutor, but then we're getting up in size and sort of moving away from standard Imperial fleets. I'd probably choose the Tonfok escort carrier to add. It basically takes another Star Destroyer's worth of ships into battle with you, but it's quite large. Like, it's a big asset, 500 meters long. If I can have it in addition to everything else, yeah, let's keep it. It can defend itself. You don't really want it to do much else. Keep it in the rear of the formation. It can do a little light screening against enemy starfighters, but I don't want to replace one of my other ships with it. And that's pretty much it. Now, I could continue this video talking about any dedicated logistics or ground invasion or support ships that I would add outside of kind of those meant for straight up ship-to-ship combat. If that's something you'd like to see me do in the future, let me know down below. But for today, we're going to call it a video. Thanks so much for your ideas and your continued support. I appreciate all of you. As always, may the Force be with you.